Hi, welcome back to Storytime with Ms. T. And the next few sessions that we get to spend together, we're going to be talking about Lent. Do you know what Lent is? Lent is the 40 days before Easter. And we all know about Easter. Or do we? Let's find out. But today, we're going to learn about the very first Lord's Supper. This is the very first Lord's Supper. And we find this story in Matthew, the 26th chapter, verses 17 through 75. And then we find it again in Mark, the 14th chapter, verses 12 through 72. And a third time we find it in Luke, the 22nd chapter, verses 7 through 71. So we find this story 3 times in the Bible. It must be pretty important. This is told by Swanee Ballman, and it's illustrated by Michael Streff. As Jesus walked toward Jerusalem, where he would observe the Passover, he called to Peter and then to John, these 2 disciples and no others. Do you remember how many disciples Jesus had? That's right, he had 12, but he's only talking to 2 right now. Go into town ahead of me. There you will find a big room where we can stay to celebrate. I'll be with you soon. So here's Jesus telling Peter and John to go get ready, because Passover was a celebration that the Jews observed every year. When Jesus finished talking, off went Peter and John. They met a man, as Jesus had planned, and to his house they went on. They arranged the room with tables and chairs. They bought roasted lamb, wine, and bread. When all was done, the master came with his disciples, as he had said. As they sat down for the Passover meal and paused for a blessing to be offered, Jesus spoke to his friends, "Eat this meal with me before I must suffer." What's he talking about suffering? Looks like a pretty good meal to me. How about you? And now all 12 are there. Jesus took the bread, gave thanks, and broke it for all to see. "This is my body given for you. Take, eat, and remember me." After supper was done, he raised his cup. When the men were all quiet, he said, "This cup is the New Testament in my blood. For forgiveness it is shed." As Jesus talked, Judas slipped out from the room. With the priest he had promised to meet, this was the night he'd betray his Lord. His assignment would then be complete. Oh my goodness, what is Judas going to do? And who would leave a wonderful meal like that? It must have been important. Let's find out. Peter, the man who was always so bold, said, "Lord, as I live and have breath, no matter what happens, I'll stay by your side, both in prison and later in death." The Lord just shook his head. "No, Peter," he said. "Before the cock even crows, that's a rooster. You'll have claimed that you're not one of my own, and that Jesus you don't even know." Oh my goodness. Let's see what's going to happen. Then they walked to Gethsemane so Jesus could spend time in prayer. Taking Peter, James, and John with him, he asked them to watch with him there. Jesus asked them to pray. He slipped away and knelt down alone. Then God's Son prayed that his burden would be lifted from him, but that God's will would be done. He told God what he wanted, but then he told God that he would do whatever God wanted him to do. When he had finished, he walked back to his friends, who had slept through his whole prayer on the mount. They woke up with a start, hearing noise from afar of men coming, too many to count. The multitude walked right up to the Lord. Out from the crowd, Judas stepped. He walked straight to Jesus and gave him a kiss. His promise to the priest he had kept. Maybe he should have worried about his promise to Jesus instead of the one to the priest, do you think? Let's see what's going to happen now. They took Jesus straight to the high priest's house. Peter hid himself deep in the crowd. A woman saw Peter and yelled, "You're with him!" "No, not me," Peter's voice was quite loud. Denied and alone, Jesus faced the high priest. "Are you the Christ?" the man asked. "I am," said Jesus, "the one sent by God." The priests tore their clothes in disgust. The priests and leaders took Jesus to Pilate, the judge who would send him to the cross. They didn't know they were a part of God's plan to save and heal all our lost. See, they were doing what they wanted to do, but they didn't know that this was a part of God's plan. We need to find out what God's plan is, so join us next time.